When it seems as if it's all too broken to mend, house flooded, house on fire, there are these meadows by the river.
And welcome to Spokes. In this episode, I'm talking to the poet Mark Roper. Mark was born in Derbyshire, England in 1951. His father was a Church of England vicar. When Mark was 3, the family moved to Barnet in North London, and that's where Mark grew up. He met his partner Jane when they were in college together, and in 1980, the two of them moved to County Kilkenny in Ireland. Mark has 7 collections of poetry, multiple awards, and he's been widely published in anthologies and in many of the leading poetry journals of our time. He's also written 3 books in collaboration with the photographer Paddy Dwan, books about the River Suir, about Tremore's Backstrand, and about the Cummeragh Mountains. He has also collaborated with many others from across the arts, including the composer Eric Sweeney, with whom he wrote an opera. He has run writing classes and workshops for around 25 years. In 2014, Mark had a fall in the Cummeragh Mountains and broke his neck. He had cancer in 2016 and a different cancer in 2017. He's recovered from all of these setbacks. He still teaches a literature class in Kilkenny, and he's working on a book about the Waterford coastline with Paddy Dwan. And he continues to write poetry. I met Mark at his home in the Irish countryside back in March 2020.
So this is the house, Heron Cottage. As I say, we named it for the herons that came into the field when we first moved here. It was just a tiny little cottage, very low, with 3 rooms in it, which we bought for 8,000 punts. It's a townland called Tobinabrone, which means well of the quernstone. And so a couple of fields away there's a spring. It's a kind of holy well which is coming up through a quernstone, a millstone. The water comes up through the middle of that stone. But we just like it here. We've got lovely neighbours, and it's very nice not having anyone immediately beside us.
Hi. That's Jane, Mark's partner. She appears at the door, sees the microphone, and quickly disappears again.
Don't know who she is. Never seen her before.
Judging from the garden, you're into the gardening, are you?
Oh, completely, yeah. I'm completely mad about gardening. So this has all been built from scratch, the garden here. And I absolutely love the garden. I've been building it for about 38 years, and it's just about sort of, I never had a plan for it, but it's kind of sort of complete.
Does it stretch far back?
Yeah. I'll just change my shoes and then I'll come up with you and I'll show you.
Hi Jane, I'm sorry to be interrupting your
Sorry, are you talking?
quiet morning.
Oh, not at all. I won't talk. I'm going to yoga.
Okay.
Bye.
So this has been added on. This is a sunroom at the back. And then all the rest of it I built all the little walls that you would see, little stone walls I would have built.
But yourself, did you?
Yeah, the ones that where things look flat, that's where the builder's done it properly. Where things look knobbly, and round. That's me. Just picking up stones out of the fields. And,
No way.
Yeah.
So you kind of sourced them yourself?
Yeah, just collected them. So it's slowly taken shape, and I actually really love working in it. It's lovely to walk around as well, but the real pleasure I get is actually just working in the garden.
And what is that pleasure?
I suppose it's kind of you could say it's getting completely lost. It's a good question. It might be, getting into harmony with something. It might be escaping from something, but it's getting into some kind of rhythm, both physically and mentally, and it's working with things that are living as well. There's everything else going on. There's the bird song, there's the weather. So yeah, it's it's almost like a kind of form of meditation in that you forget about yourself and forget about everything, when you're actually doing it. And, although you're not aware of it, you're actually making something as well. That's a buzzard calling. That kind of mew sound was a buzzard.
Oh. See, the snowdrops are out?
Yeah, the snowdrops. There's hundreds and hundreds of snowdrops.
Will we have a little walk around?
Yep. I collect different kinds of snowdrops. So these are sort of slightly unusual ones. You can see this one has yellow. It's got yellow markings on the flower. That one has a green dot on the petals. This is one. It's actually called Mark's Tall. That one, which a friend gave me, which I like. And my dad would have liked, that would be kind of his sense of humour, that, you might say to me, what's that snowdrop? And I would say, Mark's tall. And he would say, he is, isn't he? That he would love that kind of joke.
And the paths, you have flagstones kind of in the grass.
Yeah, we would have got these put in because the ground's actually quite wet. I would have put this stream in.
Really?
There was, up there is where we get our water from. There's a pump, but there's a very powerful spring, and there was a pipe coming from there under the ground, and it goes out into the ditch under the ground. But what I've actually done is I kind of cut the pipe, built a bed, so that this is the first section of the water is now running over the ground, and then it drops back into the pipe. So this is just absolutely lovely. The sound, there's at least two different sounds coming from the water. And I know, it used to be an exercise, I believe, with trainee Japanese or Chinese poets, that they had to identify the sound of rain on leaves, and they had to, enumerate a whole different series of sounds that the water would make on leaves. So in a small way, I've got that. If it's rained very hard, you're going to get a slightly different note coming from it. If it's dry as well, there would be less of a sound. So it's very wet. We're at the bottom of what they call the Welsh Hills, on limestone. So if it rains hard, you actually get springs coming up all over the place. As I say, it's quite a wet area. I think Ted Hughes said, if you're writing, it's great to know that you're not going to be disturbed. But he said it's even better to know that you can't be disturbed. So I thought about this for a while, and eventually, I got what every man really wants, which is a shed up the garden. So I'll show you. Should I just we'll have a look in?
Yeah. So this is down at the back of the garden now.
Yeah. So I'm trying not to knock that. I'm just going to take those off because they're muddy.
Would I take
You're
off
all
my
right.
shoes?
No, yeah.
You
okay.
sure?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I'm a good wife.
You're fine.
Okay.
So
Oh, wow. So this is the man shed.
yeah, this is the man shed. It's kind of, it's great, obviously. It's a big space. These are all my poetry books. These would be, bird books, flower books of every kind. There's the cream of my nature books, to call them that, there.
So this is where you spend your days then, is it?
Yeah, I don't do anything, I just hide up here. But yeah, this is where I would write. I'm kind of extremely spoilt. There's a desk for the computer, there's a desk where I write, and there's a desk over here which I kind of use for if I find objects or if I'm looking at birds or things like that. So it's interesting. Seamus Heaney said that he was wary of having too nice a place to write, because he thought, if it was too nice, too well appointed, everything in its place, he was worried that he said that the poems might abscond, that the writing might abscond. So, and he also said, what he found were very good things for writing was being on a journey, in an airport, on a plane, on a train, something like that, on a little break. And I actually find that myself, that's often, it's just a little disruption to a routine that would often trigger a piece of writing. And I find that a lot at the moment, that I actually do most of my writing not here, but I come in here to finish it off. So I always carry a notebook, and I'd be scribbling in that outside of here. But then, this is where hopefully the poems actually get finished off. I've got a huge collection of notebooks that I'm writing in one way or another. I usually got 12 or 15, all of which have different functions.
Like what?
Well, there'd be one for initial ideas. There'd be one for kind of working up those ideas. There'd be one for working them up a bit more. I'm working with Paddy Dwan on a book about the Waterford coastline. So there's another one for that. There's one for sort of keeping records of things that are going. There'll be one for birds that I've seen lately, one for flowers that I've seen lately. So there are all sorts of notebooks.
You love birds and flowers, like nature's a big thing.
Yeah.
Is that connected to poetry, or?
It probably is, in that it's increasingly what I write about. Poems get triggered by seeing a bird, by seeing a flower. It's not necessarily that the poems are going to end up being, about the bird or the flower, but they do get triggered that way a lot. That's not just why I love them. It's just I always have, been really interested in looking at birds and flowers. So now, for about the last 5 years, spent a lot of time looking for different orchids with a small group of friends. So the orchid season is coming, so that's always really exciting.
And why? I mean, what is it about orchids?
They're particularly orchids. They're extremely beautiful. They're very unusual flowers. They are very beautiful if you look at them closely. The way they work, the way the flowers work, is absolutely wonderful. So there's something to me infinitely fascinating about them. They're just really beautiful. It's to me, it's just a huge part of being alive, is enjoying the beauty and mystery of this world and being alive in it. Last year I was out with Paddy Tobin, a friend who I go out with a lot. We went to look for a bog orchid in a particular area of kind of North Wexford, I suppose, Carlow-ish, a huge hill, and I had a satellite reference, and we searched and searched over this bog. So you're looking for a flower that's probably about an inch high, and which is, has very little colour in the flower, and we couldn't find it. But the looking for it was great, just the tramping around.
So people obviously share the coordinates. They find there's a group of people, and you kind of tell each other. Yeah. So it's just the thrill of finding these rare.
But also, as I say, it's the thrill, sometimes of not finding them, because it takes you out into very unusual places which you'd never go, for any other reason. We've got a lot of old wooden furniture. I've inherited quite a lot from my mother. There's a lot more in the house, and I've written it. It kind of fascinates me because, one, it's really unfashionable now. So when we die, I don't know if anybody's going to want it, but it's going to survive, for hundreds of years, that furniture. So there's something, something about that I find really interesting. The fact that it was once alive as well as wood interests me as well.
I can smell incense in the air.
Yeah, I've burnt incense kind of all my life. So I nearly always have some incense. It helps me to concentrate. But
what's the favourite smell?
I like jasmine incense. I like rose incense very much. But any kind really. I just love it. Yeah.
Great. Where are we going now?
We'll just go around to the left. So this is a vegetable garden.
Your hens.
With one hen. This is Betty, the hen, and we think she's at least 12 years old, which is extraordinary.
Have you had her for that long?
Yeah.
Hello, Betty. Let's see if she says anything.
Say hello, Betty. Betty, say hello. Say hello.
Betty.
She's shy.
There was a little noise.
Yeah, there you go.
That's about it.
We've had this one. This is a hen arc, and we've had that actually more or less since we moved in. We've had hens. They've obviously come and gone, but I still I don't know. I'll see if she's no egg, but she is 12, so it's hard to expect to still be laying, but I still get an enormous kick out of finding an egg. It's just absolutely great. So I wrote a poem about this called the Hen Arc, which is also a love poem to Jane. So she's the kind of spirit of the garden, I suppose, up here. Yeah, she's warming up now.
You've got Buddhist prayer flags.
Yeah. Yes, I like having those.
It's a nice bit of colour as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a nice bit, and it's just beautiful. When back in the 1990s, we made 3 trips to Ladakh in northern India on the far side of the Himalayas, a very, very remote area. But one of the things you see, in Ladakh, it's really high up. It's all over 11,000 feet. And we trekked a bit. And when you go over the high passes, when you come to the pass, there'll always be masses of prayer flags. To celebrate the achievement, to appease the gods. And they'll often be almost, completely faded away. They're disappearing, as their prayers get blown out on the wind.
Well, yours look very fresh and colourful.
Yeah.
They're not really faded yet, are they?
No, they're about a year old, I think. But I actually love seeing things fade and slowly disappear. I'm not sure why, but one of my favourite stories is there's a cathedral in Spain where when a cardinal dies, the hats that cardinals wear, they put that hat kind of on a post in the cathedral and they just leave it there until it disappears. It slowly sort of fades away and disappears. And I'm very sort of attracted to that idea of things staying still, and I know the flags aren't staying still, but things just being allowed to take their time to disappear. There's something that's always just fascinated me.
Are you religious?
I'm not. No, I'm not in any strict sense of religion, and I always avoid the term spiritual because I don't sort of think there's any spirit apart from the body. So, but if you use the pejorative sense of spiritual, then I suppose I would be quite interested in that aspect of things. That's a very convoluted answer, but I don't know if that makes any sense. But
Can we keep going?
Yep.
So as we're going, your kind of background in poetry, when did you begin?
I would have always scribbled things during my teens. It was terrible, kind of adolescent, self-pitying rubbish. But I did it. But I didn't really start writing until we moved here, about 1980. And then when we moved here, when we were living up in Owning, with our friends, and after we'd been here about a year, my mother asked me to keep a diary for a year. Just not have sort of got up this morning, brushed my teeth and so on, but of things that I observed and thought about. And what I found was that I began to take it more and more seriously. I was writing about going for a walk, say, and then I would work on it and edit it and try and improve it. And quite a lot of that was using natural imagery. And that I think really woke an interest. And I think she might have done that deliberately. I'm not sure. She might have sensed, that there was a writer in there.
That's what I was going to ask. Why did she ask you to keep a diary?
Yeah, I'd say, it might well have been that.
Were you close to your mum?
Yeah, I was very close to her. Yeah, in all sorts of ways. She was. I say she loved flowers. She loved walking. She loved swimming. She loved being outside. But I suppose with me, it never occurred to me that I could be a writer or could be a poet. It's just part of my makeup. That was something that other people did, and never occurred to me. But then I wrote 3 or 4 short stories, which were probably pretty awful as well. And there was a weekend workshop in Waterford run by Van Boland, and I went to that, and at that met up with about 10 other people, all really interested in writing, and we formed this Waterford Writers' Workshop called Initials. And we met once a month, and it was your turn to read every so often. And there was a woman there, Ros Cowman, who said to me one time, I think your stories are really poems. Why don't you have a go at writing a poem? And so I did. And once I got going, I just couldn't stop.
So when you were a kid, then what was the dream?
I never had a dream, really. I never really wanted to be. I maybe wanted to be a footballer at one time. There was a short period I wanted to be a chartered accountant because my friend's dad was one, and he was a lot richer than we were. So I used to pray, please God, make me a chartered accountant. I thought it was all one word, but it never happened. But I'm peculiar in that way. I've got very little sort of forward planning in my mind. I seem to have missed out somewhere on being able to think ahead. I think they're probably, 3 great interests would be writing, would be gardening, and would be nature, to use that word, would be really important.
And Jane.
And Jane, yeah. No, I said interest. I can't call Jane an interest.
Tell me about Jane.
Well, Jane, I've known since I was 17. She was 18. So we met not long. Well, I think about the second day at university. I'll tell this story. We met. We'd gone to university. We'd gone to some sort of do. And we were walking back along the road, and we looked over a hedge, and there was a girl being sick on a doormat, on a welcome mat, and there was a girl holding her and keeping her hair pulled back. So Jane was not the one being sick. She was the one who was holding the hair back. And the other girl was Marion, who's still our very best friend. After all this time, so we weren't really together for a few years, but eventually I suppose we were always going to get together, and we did.
Why do you say you're always going to get together?
Because we were, I suppose. Yeah. So yeah, we've just been very happy together, I think. Since then.
Are symbols important for you?
How do you mean?
Like you said about the herons. And I know once you had a badge on your lapel of a bird.
Yeah, I think that was a heron. In a way, it was kind of important to call the house Heron Cottage. In some way, little things like having the prayer flags. If I'm starting a notebook and writing in it, I usually find a picture that I particularly like, cut out and glue it to the notebook. It's like a kind of consecration, you might say, in some way. That heightens something. I know there's a story about T.S. Eliot one time answering his front door to someone who'd called, and to the person's amazement, Eliot had kind of green facial makeup on, and it turned out that when he wrote, at times he would do this, put green makeup on his face to make himself strange to himself. There was more chance of inspiration if in some way you slightly observe some kind of ritual, make yourself strange. So there are certain things that I suppose are important to me, for trying to get as far as you can into some kind of zone for writing.
After our time in the garden at Mark's house, we drove for about 5 miles on country roads to a remote setting. We climbed over a gate into a field.
So we're looking over, quite a long area of river meadows. These would be meadows on the edge of the River Suir, grassland meadows, and there's a flock of over 100 whooper swans there, and probably at least the same number of grey-lag geese. So there's kind of significant numbers of these birds, and very beautiful sight. The whooper swans would come here for the winter. They would fly from Iceland, and they spend the winter here in increasing numbers. I think it's something to do with climate change, that more of them, they've always come, but more and more of them come each year. So I come down here a lot, more than once a week, just to have a really good look at them. There's something about seeing wildlife in abundance that's rare now. Obviously there's been catastrophic declines in the numbers of wildlife of every kind, and there's really, when you're looking at anything wild, to use that word, it's been damaged in some way. You no longer can look at a natural landscape anymore because it will have been damaged. So to see a lot of something is a treat. It's to some extent it's sort of how things used to be. You might say it's how things should be. This is what the world should look like, but we've done so much damage to it that it no longer looks like that. So I find something very special about this.
At that point, I left. We said our goodbyes with a plan to meet again a few weeks later. We were going to meet up in the Cummer Mountains, and he was going to show me the spot where he had fallen and broken his neck. We were also going to go to Tramore and the Backstrand, where Mark spends much of his time looking at birds. And also we were going to go to the Waterford coastline, where he's currently working on a book with his friend, the photographer Paddy Dwan. But it wasn't to be. The very next week, Ireland went into the first phase of what would become a severe lockdown that lasted months. By early August, things were still not looking like we could meet, so I asked Mark to record some poems on his phone, and I asked him to say a bit about how he has coped with lockdown.
This is a poem about those swans called Meadows. Meadows. When it seems as if it's all too broken to mend, house flooded, house on fire, there are these meadows by the river, in winter a safe haven for wild swans. They eat more grass than I would like, says the farmer, but they need their place. All day the swans attend to that grass, heads bowed, you might say, in prayer, necks bent in humility, but only feeding. Squabbles break out, but their bones are not bones of contention. Lapwing and curlew feed close beside. You stand at the edge of the meadow. Step further in, and they will lift heads, straighten necks, start to scuttle away. So you learn to keep your distance. In their place, on the great rivers of water and grass, to let them be. And now I'm asking your question. It was March when we met for the early interview. It's now August. How have you been coping with COVID? Yes, it's actually 5 months have gone by since then. And I remember you were probably the first person I knew who really took it seriously and saw what was coming. We were actually on our way to the airport. We were going to a holiday in Morocco when we happened to turn on the radio and, had the first sort of news of the first lockdown. And we had a kind of very fraught half hour trying to decide, should we go or should we not? And in the end decided to turn back. And probably a couple of days later, it seemed mad that we should have even considered it at all. Probably for us, it really hasn't been too bad. I've been able to write and do my garden and in many ways carry on as normal. I realise we're extremely lucky in that. It's obviously been, absolutely terrible for so many other people, but probably not too bad for us. I think at the start there was a real kind of intensity in the air. I think with the partly with the weather being so good, with the fact that it was spring, and the sense of solidarity as well, that, wondering what was coming next, led to this great kind of intensity, I felt. And so this is a poem I wrote at that time. It's called More Than Ever. More than ever. Now more than ever, swallow, is the time to come, up the river and over the field. Now, rook, the time to know your ramshackle basket of twig holds its fragile trove. Blackcap, this moment more than ever, we need your hidden delivery, sudden mad burst of song. Gorse, your rich and delicate perfume. Dandelion, your cloth of gold. Thrush, do not fail us now. Sling your fervent prayer into the wind, into the driving rain. Primrose, please keep sketching your soft circles. above a still lake of bluebell, unfurl, beech tree, your tender leaf. More than ever, moon, your shining example. More than ever, pebble, your patience. I think I did find, we had a couple of local woods to walk in, and that was great. But I did miss being in the mountains, being at the coast. I've lost a summer of hunting for orchids. The first time that we did go out, first time we went, sort of broke the 7 mile limit. I think it was 7 miles, or maybe it was 2 miles. But the first time anyway, we went into the mountains after a very long gap. It was really strange. Really felt like, sort of babes coming out into the wider world. And this is a poem I wrote about that feeling. This is called Coming Out. Coming out. Like birds on the brink of a nest, unfledged, beaks agape, there we were on the Marmar Road, between Coomeraglen Mountain and a far-off shining sea. Out of house, out of hedge, we were there, lark song running in stations of air, soft heads of bog cotton nodding assent to it all. Words, what were they, and how should we use them? The coming of evening over ridge and valley, dewfall of stars in the endless dark. Would we ever again be ready, be able for this? So I'll leave it there, Colette. I hope that's enough. I hope you'll be able to work that in. And special thanks to Billy, who's let me record this.
That's it for this episode of Spokes. Thanks to our guest, Mark Roper. We'll put links and more information on the show notes. If you enjoy Spokes, please subscribe. And we have a new Facebook page, so do check it out. It's Spokes the Podcast. Until next time, goodbye.
Please like and subscribe and share the video.
There is no video.
Podcast.